Okay, so you've brought us some really powerful material today. We're looking at 1 Corinthians 15, verses 1 to 11, really digging into the core of Christian belief here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the title they've given it, The Gospel's Power, well, it sets a high bar. It mentions being anchored in resurrection joy right in the intro.
That phrase really jumps out, resurrection joy. So I think our aim for this deep dive is clear. Let's unpack what this message is really about, and maybe more importantly, what it actually means for us day to day.
Sounds good. We'll focus first on what the material calls the central message of the gospel, and then shift to the evidence presented for the resurrection itself.
Great. So this first section, the gospel central message, it makes the point that Paul is giving us the gospel in its purest form here. What are the key components?
Well, it boils down to three core things, doesn't it? The material highlights. Jesus died for our sins.
Okay.
He was buried, and then he rose again. Simple, direct.
But crucially, it adds that phrase, according to the scriptures.
Exactly. That's key. It wasn't just something that happened out of the blue. It's framed as, the fulfillment of what was already written specifically in the Old Testament.
Right. Rooted in history and prophecy. And this material really stresses that this isn't just an interesting idea or doctrine. It calls it the cornerstone of our salvation. That sounds incredibly fundamental.
It is. It's not presented as just like a motivational talk or something inspirational.
It's more than that.
Much more. The material says it's not a slogan, but God's divine plan for salvation. Think about what that means. Real forgiveness, actual freedom, tangible hope. These aren't just nice thoughts. They're presented as results of God's action.
A real shift then, not just surface level. And it also makes a point about reality, right? It says it's real, grounded in the Bible, and proven throughout history. That historical claim feels important.
It's vital, because if it's just a story, well, it loses its power. But presenting it as historically grounded, as events that actually occurred, that gives it weight. That's what makes the promise of salvation believable, according to this source.
Okay, so we have this massive central message. How does it actually connect to, Monday morning? The material offers some practical applications, which I thought were really helpful. First one, stay grounded. What does that look like?
Yeah, that's the real question, isn't it? How does belief change behavior? Staying grounded, as they put it, seems to mean consciously recalling these core truths, Christ's death, burial, resurrection, especially when things get tough.
So actively remembering.
Actively remembering, using it as an anchor, to recenter yourself when life throws you off balance. It's a deliberate mental and spiritual practice.
Got it. Like a compass when you're lost. The second point was keep it simple when sharing your faith. Why that advice?
The material suggests starting right at the heart of it. Christ crucified and risen. The idea seems to be don't get bogged down immediately in complex theology or secondary issues.
Just the core message.
Yeah, that core message itself is powerful. Start there. That's
Yeah.
the foundation everything else is built on. Keep it clear. Keep it focused.
Makes sense. Easy to get lost in the details otherwise. And the final application here is live like it's true. This feels like where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely. This is the challenge, right? To let the joy and freedom of your salvation flow into your relationships, your work, and your worship. It's about belief becoming visible.
So if you really believe it, it should show up everywhere.
That's the idea. And how you treat people, how you approach your job, how you participate in your faith community, it should all be influenced by this core truth. Can you think of maybe a situation where that's hard and how focusing on the gospel might help?
Oh, definitely. Maybe in conflict. When you're angry or hurt, it's easy to react badly.
Sure.
Perhaps remembering the forgiveness you've received through the gospel. Maybe that helps you extend grace, even when it's difficult.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. Letting that truth reshape your knee-jerk reactions. Okay, so that's the foundational message. Now, the material moves to the witness of the resurrection. And this is the make or break point, isn't it?
It really is. Claiming someone died for sins is one thing. Claiming they came back to life, that's a whole different level.
And what's compelling is how the material tackles the evidence head on. It points out that Paul isn't vague. He lists specific witnesses.
Right. Individuals and groups. Peter, then the 12.
Then a group of over 500 believers at once. James, all the apostles.
And Paul himself, finally.
And Paul himself. And the material stresses these were real encounters, not just wishful thinking or, dreams.
It specifically says not hallucinations or dreams. That number, the 500, that's striking. Hard to dismiss 500 people seeing the same hallucination at the same time.
It certainly presents a challenge to purely psychological explanations. It suggests something observable happened. You have to wonder what the impact was back then of so many people claiming this.
Yeah, and the material talks about that impact, how these witnesses went from being, frankly, terrified and hiding after the crucifixion
Right, scattered.
to suddenly becoming bold messengers, willing to suffer, even die for proclaiming this resurrection. That transformation itself is powerful evidence, isn't it? It's hard to explain that kind of conviction based on a lie or a delusion.
It really is. The material frames the resurrection as a historical fact backed by living proof, and it says, this proof provides unshakable confidence. That's a strong claim. Unshakable.
It implies certainty, not just hope. Confidence in the faith itself, and also, crucially, in the promise of our own future resurrection.
Exactly. This is where it connects directly to our ultimate hope. The resurrection isn't just about Jesus. It's presented as the defeat of death itself.
Jesus defeated death, and because he lives, so will we. That line from the material sums it up powerfully. It's not just about forgiveness now, but a solid promise about the future, about life after death.
A future modeled on Christ's own resurrection.
So like before, how does this belief in a witness historical resurrection play out practically? The material again gives us some applications. First, be a joyful witness. How does the resurrection lead to joy?
Well, the connection seems pretty direct. If you genuinely believe death isn't the end, that it's been overcome, that naturally leads to a deep underlying joy, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can see that.
So the encouragement is to share how the risen Jesus has changed your life. Your own story becomes part of the ongoing testimony. It's about letting that hope shine through you.
Your life becomes evidence, in a way. Okay, second point. Encourage hope, especially in hard times.
This is where it becomes really potent, I think. When facing loss, grief, or fear, this belief provides a unique anchor. The material urges us to remember and remind others that death isn't the ultimate end. It offers comfort, resilience. It fundamentally changes the perspective on suffering and mortality.
It reframes the ending. It offers a hope beyond the immediate pain. And the last application point here is to walk boldly. What does that mean? Walking boldly.
Living with courage, purpose, and joy. That's how the material puts it. It suggests being empowered by the very same power that raised Jesus.
So not timidly.
No, not timidly. It's about stepping out confidently, embracing the freedom and hope the resurrection brings, knowing that the ultimate enemy, death, has been dealt with. Living with a sense of purpose grounded in that victory.
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've really covered the core message, Christ's death, burial, and resurrection for salvation. And then the crucial evidence, the eyewitness accounts of the resurrection.
And the implications for both confidence and faith and for how we live.
Right. And the material leaves us with a very direct final thought, doesn't it?
It does. Just one word as a takeaway. Stand firm in the gospel truth. A clear call to hold fast to these foundational beliefs.
Stand firm. Okay, so considering all this, the message, the witnesses, a call to stand firm, here's maybe something to chew on. How might really grappling with the historical evidence for the resurrection, seeing it as something potentially verifiable, how might that actually change your day-to-day decisions or even just your gut feeling about the future?
That's a good question to reflect on personally. How does historical belief translate into present reality?
Definitely something to think about further.